وينشر الهدي إيمانا وموعظة فبالجهالة قد خابت مساعينا غابت مناقبنا واسود حاضرنا غابت مناقبنا واسود حاضرنا وأوشك اليأس أن يغشى.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum. Welcome to another edition of the Sulaimaan Ravat Show. We are getting ever so closer to the season of Hajj. Unbelievable, yes. I mean, Ramadan just came and went, and then a few weeks in between, and now we're talking about Hajj. And on ITV and other media platforms, the Hajj broadcast and the Hajj coverage will start to intensify as we get closer to the days of Hajj, to the 1st of Dhul Hijjah, and that's when the atmosphere really kicks in, and then the 8th of Dhul Hijjah, when the Hajj commences in the Holy Lands. But obviously, for the Hujjaj that have gone already, may Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala accept their efforts thus far. Those that are to go, may Allah make it easy for them and accept everyone's Hajj. And yes, every heart yearns. That's like, as the Quran mentions, مَثَابَةً لِلنَّاسِ وَأَمْنًا. It has a magnetic effect. Hardly do you return from the Holy Lands, whether it's Hajj or Umrah, whether it's your first time or your 20th time, when you come back, the heart is already desirous to go again. And that is because Allah has made it such. It is the navel of the earth. The Kaaba is situated directly beneath the throne and the Arsh of Allah. All that effulgence and the spirituality, the barakat, the blessings descend upon the Kaaba, and from there it is disseminated throughout the world. And these Hujjaj that go, they are basically representing us. They go and they bring back all of that barakah. So we actually have a duty, we have a responsibility to make dua for them, because their success is our success. But logistics and the whole process prior to even departing, prior to even getting to the airport and embarking on this journey of a lifetime, a sacred journey, there's a lot of processes involved, there's a lot of administration involved because of the large numbers. It's a very unique congregation. It draws the attention of even non-Muslims throughout the globe, even though it happens every single year. And we know that we have Sahuk here in South Africa, and there's a lot of different processes that kick in way in advance, and then there are processes that are applicable during the journey for the Hujjaj, and then other processes during the 5 days, etc. And it's a very apt time to have in the studio the president of Sahuk, Shayn Isup. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khairan for the opportunity, Moulana, and salamu alaikum to the viewers out there.
It's been a bit of a while, but always a pleasure to have you in the studio.
Alhamdulillah, yes, it certainly has been, but always a pleasure to be here and to share information and to share process, inshallah.
Let's talk about your journey. I mean, starting on a bit of a personal note. People like yourself who do great work in the community don't like to talk about themselves, but it's interesting nonetheless, and it's also motivational for other people. These days we live in an environment where people are chasing, and there's a rat race, and not that many people, or not an adequate amount of people, are getting involved in community initiatives. I remember, I think, what was it, back in 2004, 2005, there was a Mr. Shayn Isup who was involved at the Gauteng level at Sahuk. Do you sometimes look back and think about all of it?
I certainly do, Moulana, and we must say alhamdulillah, we make shukr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for choosing us to be involved in the processes relating to people departing for Hajj, and we hope inshallah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept from us, not only from myself but from my team and from everybody around the country that is involved in the whole process of Hajj service delivery.
What was it for you? Was it your own personal Hajj experience that got you thinking of, I need to get involved, I need to see how we can contribute towards making it easier, making it better, not perfecting, but improving the processes?
I think going back to, to the early 2000s, yes, I made Hajj with my family, alhamdulillah, and at that time, processes were sort of almost non-existent. I sat down with the operator that I traveled with and I said, you know what, I think it's time that one puts a little bit of shoulder to the wheel and get involved in this industry. The question was asked, are you going to become a Hajj operator? And I said, absolutely not. One needs to get involved in the administration and the regulation and the processes in order to structure it. I then wrote to Sahuk and informed them of some of my observations, some of the criticisms, and I gave recommendations to those criticisms and gave some constructive structure in that whole process. I was invited to a meeting and joined the meeting as an independent. One day led to the next and I got involved, and alhamdulillah today I lead the organization. with the qudrat of Allah.
So it was regional, Gauteng,
Yes,
and then
into the
at some
national.
point you became spokesperson, national spokesperson, then Secretary General, then Deputy President, then Secretary General again, and then President.
Yes,
Is my memory good?
Yeah, I think you do have a good memory, but we've come a long journey together.
When you look back, I mean, I know, because when I started off in media around that time, 2004, 2005, I mean, no disrespect intended to whoever was playing a part that time, but it was pretty chaotic. There were a lot of issues, and SAHUK didn't have, to be honest, SAHUK didn't have the best of reputations. To what extent it was justified or not, I mean, that debate can continue, and it's not really relevant. But the reason I bring it up is that, I mean, there has to be acknowledgement to not only yourself, but many others in the last decade or so, where today, you always have people who have issues, but there's a lot of credibility around the name of SAHUK. There's a lot of confidence, and there's a lot of structure, I think, in the processes.
I think before we even step into that realm, Moulana, we need to have, to salute the people that started off with SAHUK. Political parties were involved, various other structures were involved, and the leaders of those days had tremendous challenges to them. Challenges in the sense that this was something totally new. This was a whole process that needed to have been, conjured up by the Department of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Hajj in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And together with that came its own dynamics and its own challenges. And yes, they've gone through, this organization has gone through peaks and troughs and, a huge amount of pitfalls. I mean, people didn't understand what the administration and the, regulation of SAHUK or the Hajj industry was. And at that time, there was serious amount of issue that was taken with the organization, with members of the organization, and people felt that, individually people were benefiting out of this whole organization. I can clearly say that, from then till now, nobody has benefited financially or any other way, in the service of that delivery to the Hujjaj. Yes, alhamdulillah, the constitution was changed a few times to make sure that we, keep up to date with corporate governance and corporate structures, and maintained a whole process, developing policy and developing process in the, in the wake that we leave behind. And alhamdulillah, today we can see that things seem to be working well. There's still a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done, and a lot still needs to, to be put into place for the longevity of SAHUK and for the legacy to be left behind.
Again, an observation from a media perspective. I think one of the big challenges that SAHUK had in the mid-2000s was the ability to effectively communicate with the masses. I take your point that there were a lot of sincere people working behind the scenes. There's no doubt about that. But perceptions many times are fueled when there isn't effective communication. Sure. And I think that's where you managed to plug in. And I think that can be acknowledged as one of the strengths of SAHUK these days. The road shows, the regular interviews, the interactions, the panel discussions. It's really made people understand the process, because from that mid-2000 onwards, then the quota started to kick in. And there were a lot of other things that happened, which, if were not handled properly from a communication perspective, could have resulted in a lot of trouble and a lot of challenges.
No, that's acknowledged. And I think, from a perspective of what one needs to understand, is that transparency is the one thing that we've really brought to the fore. We have absolutely no reason to be hiding anything or to be keeping anything behind. I mean, every year that we have our audited financials audited, immediately after it's audited and signed off by the board, it gets publicized on our website. Currently on our website is the 2015 financials, which is still there and will remain there until the 2016 financials are complete. So, these are the kind of transparencies that we put into place. We're always going to have detraction. We're always going to have people out there that are going to find fault in our process or find fault in a structure that we seem to have gone through. But we're never going to satisfy 100% of the people 100% of the time. We need to make sure that our processes and our governance and our structure is there to maintain a fair, equitable process for people to go for Hajj.
Now, when you're the head of a structure like SAHUK, which has very defined parameters, I mean, because obviously Hajj is taking place in somebody else's territory. It's not in your own territory. I would assume it's somewhat different from being on the board or being a chairman of a particular organization, an NGO, a business, where you can have a vision. You can say in 5 years' time we want to be here, or in 10 years' time we want to be there, because there the sky is the limit. You can define your parameters of growth. You can define the role that you envisage that you want to play.
Sure.
Having said that, though, you must be obviously interacting with other regulators from other countries. Where would you like to see SAHUK in 5 years' time or 10 years' time? How do you guys go about charting out, visionary aspects of SAOC?
Oh, there's a tremendous amount of strategy discussions that take place within the organization. And the key is obviously to make sure that everybody's on the same page, that everybody has the right vision and the same vision. Ultimately, what we would like to see and what we would term as a success is that everybody in South Africa who has applied on our SAOC system goes for Hajj. Whether it be in the year that you've applied for, whether it be in future years, that is our ultimate goal, to ensure that we successfully have that process in place. Whether you're a first-timer or a repeat, and at this particular point in time, unfortunately, due to the constraints in the quota or due to the scarcity of quota, we can only allow the first-timers to go, and the repeats, obviously, you are serving as mahrams, in terms of that permutation. So these are the kind of things that we would look towards. And yes, engagement with foreign, organizations, Tabung Haji, to cite one example. In Malaysia, we attended a conference there 2 years ago. In fact, been invited again in November to come for another conference on Hajj management and different process. Certainly has helped, and it continues to help to open up different avenues and different processes that will make us more professional in this country. But I think the most important key to this factor is the equation that we sit with, and the unknown part of that equation, which is the quota and an increase in the quota that we continuously ask for. But knowing that there's been some changes in the kingdom and continuous changes, we hope that this comes sooner rather than later.
Apart from the role that you play right now as a regulator, do you see as part of your vision for SAOC that you could play a greater role, that there are other areas that you could encompass? I know from time to time people ask about the Umrah element, but that and anything else, is there anything else that you feel, that any other space wherein SAOC can play a part?
Well, I think if we look at it from a regulatory perspective within that particular framework, anything that is related to travel to the kingdom, Hajj and Umrah, is something that we want to be involved in. Whilst we talk about Hajj, right now 2,000 people go and perform Hajj every year. But when you look at the numbers for the Umrah season, the figures vary between 36 and 40,000 people per annum making Umrah. Now, there's no regulation in that market. There's far too many fly-by-night operators that have sort of perked themselves up all over the place. And that becomes a problem, because the problems that we used to see back in the early 2000s in Hajj have now permeated and found themselves across in the Umrah space. SAOC only gets involved in Umrah at this particular point in time when complaints are lodged at our door or left at our doorstep to try and resolve, either through mediation or through arbitration in that particular vein. So we do believe that there is a possibility and a potential to further regulate the operators within the Umrah space to make it easier for our Mu'tamirin to go across to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia without, having issues that they can encounter in a foreign country.
Talking about Umrah, what's the status quo in the sense that as things stand, does SAOC have any regulatory authority over the operators, or is it purely a case of where you can step in and say, okay, we're willing to facilitate a kind of mediation if there's a fallout between an Umrah operator and someone that traveled with them? And in order to bring it to the point that you've just mentioned, where you explained what role you would like to see SAOC play, what needs to be done?
Well, I think the latter is more appropriate in this particular time and environment. That before we start talking about that, let's talk about how an Umrah operator is actually, brought into life. A person or an organization in South Africa needs to be an IATA licensed operator in this country. They then need to put together a memorandum of understanding between themselves and an operator in Saudi Arabia. That memorandum of association then needs to be vetted and signed off by the Ministry of Hajj, Umrah Division. And at the same time, a guarantee of 200,000 riyals needs to be put on the table. So you can see that there is quite a costly process for one to become an Umrah operator in terms of this whole thing. IATA licensing costs you probably 500,000 to 600,000 rand. 200,000 riyals at today's exchange rate is probably at 800,000 rand. So you're already in excess of 1.4 million rand, just to become an Umrah operator. And that doesn't also guarantee you that you're going to be, a successful Umrah operator, and that you're going to have enough people that are going to actually help you cover or recover your costs in this regard. Then you have to obviously put down guarantees with the airlines, guarantees with the hotels that you're going to be dealing with. So it's quite capital intensive process. And that in itself is direct right now between the the Umrah operator and the Ministry of Hajj Umrah Division. SAOC doesn't fall into that equation. What we would like to do is, we would like to vet the operators in South Africa first, before them going across and doing the MOUs and giving our basically sign of approval like we do for Hajj, where we have accredited Umrah operators. We go through an accreditation process. We make sure that this particular organization or operator is au fait with the processes, au fait with the structures, and can actually do the logistics and can actually deliver on a product that our country needs from an Umrah perspective.
There are many viewers who may have just heard an explanation of yours and they've been wondering, but what's stopping you? Why just not step up and say, right, we're going to regulate it? What are the issues?
Well, I think there are two issues. The first issue is that, in the past with Hajj, we were given the go-ahead by the Ministry of Hajj and the Department of Foreign Affairs. Right now, we need to get permission from both of those to be involved in this particular space in order to bring that extra layer of regulation or that extra layer of security and safety for the Mu'tamirin. And that's what we're currently busy with.
All right, let's go back to Hajj. Now, you spoke earlier on about whoever's on the system, right? And you would like to see them perform Hajj at some point or the other. As things stand, how many people are still on the system who have to be processed in the coming years?
Well, we've got 14,986 people that are currently on the system for the year 1437. That excludes the people that are in the future years that have applied for those particular years. So all in all, we've got about 18 or 19,000 people of first-time category that still need to be processed. And at a quota of 2,000, you're probably looking at about 8 or 9 years before that, that queue can actually be reduced. Having said that, in the last 3 years, we've had a 40 to 50% dropout rate. Now, when you look at a 40 to 50% dropout rate, that obviously reduces the waiting period quite considerably. And the majority of reason for that dropout rate is sort of shifted between financial burden or financial inability to afford your Hajj, and also circumstances that may change. Because a lot of the people that we are currently busy with right now, people that we have accredited for this year, are up to January 2013. So if you applied in, 2012 or 2011 or 2013, your circumstances may have changed. You may have changed your job, or you don't have a job anymore, or you may have utilized the money for something else that has become more pressing, in your process. And that is the main reasons that we have seen for the big dropout rate.
I know obviously you'll never want to speculate, right, because some people may hold you to it, but are you cautiously optimistic of an increase in the quota in the near future?
I'm always optimistic, Moulana, and you should know better than I that a Muslim must always be optimistic about certain things. Every year we ask the Ministry of Hajj for an increase in the quota. They've been citing different reasons why we're not getting an increase in the quota. Last year it was the construction that was still ongoing. We were hoping, inshallah, that the increase would come this year, but then the crane accident took place. After the crane accident took place, they've removed the building operators from the Haram expansion project, and that has come to a standstill. So obviously there's nothing that's going to be done in this year that we've just gone through. And then the stampede happened in Mina last year, so it just created a different angle for them to use, not to give increases in the quota per se. We again engaged them this year, and we continue to engage them. In fact, when President Zuma was in the kingdom back in March, he met with King Sulaimaan, and I was informed by people who attended the meeting that he asked for a quota of 5,000.
Are there any indications coming out of the kingdom that your engagement could be a bit more fruitful in the coming years in terms of an increase in the quota?
There's always those engagements, and there's always those kind of speculations that come out of the kingdom. We'll only know whether we've got an increase in the quota once it is done. You know that earlier on in the year they changed the whole cabinet as well, and there's a new Minister of Hajj. So with that comes different dynamics, and we hope, inshallah, that we can convince the new Minister of Hajj that there has to be an increase. And what I think would be primary and would be a very, very good solution for South Africa is for them to give us a fixed quota for a period of at least 10 years. So that we can at least get through our backlog and make sure that we can get people to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to make Hajj that has the desire to do so.
In studio with us this evening, we have President of SAHUK, Sheikh Isub. Time for us to go for a quick break. When we come back, inshallah, we focus now on the processes involved when it comes to accreditation for Hajj, and also we will focus in the latter part of the program as to what unfolds in the kingdom from the SAHUK Mission side in as far as catering for the Hajjis is concerned.
فبالجهاد بنى الإسلام قوته كاليأس أن يغشى أمانينا.
Welcome back. We have in studio this evening the President of SAHUK. We are talking Hajj. It is the season for these type of discussions, although that kind of season extends to pretty much most of the year when you look at how the Haji prepares and from the how long in advance they need to apply and that kind of thing. Shane, let's assume there's a viewer watching right now that doesn't understand the process and they're thinking, okay, I intend to go for Hajj in the near future. In as succinct as you can put it, What's the process?
It's a very simple process, Moulana. We've actually got an online website application process. But most importantly, before the viewer or anybody wants to get onto that particular website, there are frequently asked questions or registration guidelines and terms of registration that needs to be read very, very carefully. I think it's imperative that, prior to making your application for Hajj, you can't make an application and expect to go tomorrow. You need to read these terms, these guidelines, to ensure that you understand the process, that you understand the system, and that you understand the queuing structure that we've got in place. So our website is www.saukhajregistry.org.za, and you can apply as an individual, you can apply as a couple, or you can apply as a family. And there are different permutations, for people who, for example, apply as a family. If some of the people in that group have made Hajj before, and there are some first-time pilgrims, then average points will basically be awarded to that grouping, in the sense that people will then, those repeat pilgrims will bring down the points of the group in itself. If a couple, mother and father and 3 kids, you're going to find an averaging of points. But if all 5 of them have never made Hajj before, then those people are going to have 100 points each, and they're going to maintain a very high place in the queue. So this is why I stress very early that people must read the registration guidelines. They must read the terms of application. One of the key terms is that if you make an application, you have 5 days within which to make payment of that registration. And if you make the payment and it is recorded within the 5-day period, then the date of your registration remains intact. But if you defer that payment and you forget about it, and 6 months or a year later you decide you're going to make that payment, then your date of registration differs to the date that payment is received. And that is something that people battle with all the time. It's unfair to say that I made an application 3 years ago, but I've only made payment now, you've got to give me the date of 3 years ago. What about the people that have actually complied and made the payment within the specific period in order for them to be eligible in the queue higher than where you are? So, our public needs to take responsibility in terms of making sure that the information that they're going to put onto the system is true and correct to start with, and they need to understand the rules in order to follow that process. I always ask people when they come up with these questions or when they come up with these, scenarios, and I say to them, what happens when you go to, another organization and you make an application for your child who's going to school for the first time, and they tell you that this is the process. You follow that process to the hilt to make sure that you don't fail, in any step. Is Hajj less important than that? That you're going to worry about Hajj when you feel like worrying about it? And these are the kind of things, the psyche that people need to change. And one of the key factors that we find as well is that people who have been for Hajj many years before, look, we haven't got records that go back beyond 2006, 2007. Okay? And people must be honest enough to tell us that they have been for Hajj before. Who knows, inshallah, in the future, if there's a bigger quota, that we split the quota between the first-timers and the repeats, and everybody gets a fair chance to go. But right now, people are still lying on the system in order to make sure that they go. But at what expense, Moulana? They're lying, they're going to perform a nafil ibadah, and someone whose farz ibadah has not yet been completed and fulfilled now sits back and says, but why haven't I been accredited?
However, if there's a person who's been for Hajj and they're honest about it, they intend to go again for whatever reason, spiritual or otherwise, are they eligible to apply?
They can apply. They will obviously, be awarded, or the system will basically calculate lesser points. So they'll be left in the queue. And as I say, whilst we have a scarcity of quota, we cannot allow people who have been before to go again at this particular point in time, because we want to make sure that we cover people that are going to perform their farad ibadah.
What about age? If a 25-year-old applies and a 65-year-old applies, both have not performed Hajj, does the system kind of advantage the elder person?
No, it doesn't. Our system is time and date driven. So, we've looked at different permutations from around the world. Back in 2007, 2008, we actually had an age-based criteria for Hajj. One operator down in the Western Cape had 65 people on his books, and out of that 65 people, there were 58 people in wheelchairs. So the natural support was not there to assist those people to push those wheelchairs or to come to the aid of the elderly. If we're going to skew it towards the elderly, we're only going to have elderly people going for Hajj, and the natural support will then be absent in that particular point. So that is why we leave it as date and time priority, and a person who's 25 years old and a person who's 85 years old has exactly the same opportunity based on their date and time, in the queue. What
about exceptional circumstances? A person is terminally ill, has not performed Hajj. doesn't have too much of time and they would like to perform Hajj, whilst they still have a bit of time?
Moulana, a couple of things that come to mind in this regard. And one of the key factors is, the ulama that sit on our boards in Sahuk and our different committees and subcommittees, will all argue, and I think you can give guidance in this regard. Al-Hajjul Bayt man istata'a ilayhi sabila. Man istata'a is very, very important in this whole process. And man istata'a doesn't only cover your financial ability or your physical ability, it also covers your mental ability and everything else that goes with it. A person who is terminally ill or is at stage 4, stage 5 cancer, you guide me, but Hajj is not wajib on that particular person, because he becomes a strain on himself, he becomes a strain on people that are in the support structures across, during Hajj. And it's a very vigorous journey at that particular point in time. We do believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given, concession to that particular scenario. In addition to that, one needs to also look at a scenario where, we don't have the medical facilities to deal with oncology or various other factors at our clinics, because we have a primary healthcare structure. Now, when we go across to sign protocols in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia with the authorities, they tell you, please discourage people who are the infirm or discourage elderly people to come for Hajj, because it makes things exceptionally difficult, especially during this time when temperatures are going to be in excess of 50 degrees, during the days of Hajj.
Now, in terms of issues, if somebody applies and they, what you call it, they feel that, the system hasn't credited them the way they feel they ought to, do you have review mechanisms? Is there recourse? And what are those mechanisms?
Yes, we do. We have an audit trail on our system. The system basically puts a full audit from the day that, the application comes to life. If a person feels aggrieved in any way, that person writes to Sahuk. That particular, grievance gets passed on to the National Hajj Accreditation Committee, who adjudicates it based on the information that we have in our system. A lot of times people will come and say, yeah, but I didn't do this. But if you didn't do this, who put the application into the system? Sahuk certainly didn't put an application into the system. And as I say, an audit trail is something that we really made sure that when the system was designed, we have this audit trail to prove that from the time that this particular application came to life, this is the trail of events that took place over the period that the application has been in the queue.
What are the current challenges that you are facing in terms of the current operations as they stand? We hear from time to time stories, whether people are reflecting it accurately or not is a different matter, that people pull out at the 11th hour, and then whoever wants to step in sometimes is obliged to go with that package, with that particular operator. Is that a major challenge? Is that factual, firstly?
Yes, it is factual, but it is a major problem. And the major problem that you have is, Moulana, let's just use a hypothetical, not a hypothetical, but let's use an example. This year on the 24th or 25th of April, we accredited the first batch of people. 2,000 accreditations went out into the public domain. And we rolled out 5 lists thereafter. April to August, about a week ago, we still had 2 or 3 or 4 cancellations that came through. The problem that you're faced with is you have timelines in the background that you also have to fulfill with the Ministry of Hajj and the Muassasa in order to close the process in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for finalization of numbers. So if a Hajj operator has got 100 people on his books and 3 people cancel at the 11th hour, then you can't have a choice of going with a different operator, because the numbers have already been made finite in the system of the Ministry of Hajj. And to undo that takes a longer time and more structural damage than, rather getting 3 people to go with that specific operator. The negotiation in terms of the package needs to be made sure that those people can sit down and discuss with the operator, because that operator has got certain blocks that they have booked in Medina, that they have booked in Makkah, that they have to move to Azizia. And those blocks are basically put into the system in terms of the contracts that they have entered into. So yes, you have to fit into that process in order to, go for Hajj. But you have the choice as the Haji. Because when Sahuk phones you up and says, I have a cancellation with operator ABC, and that operator has got 2 spaces, you can either accept and say, yes, I'm ready to go now, or decide to say, no, I don't want to go now. I'm actually going to wait until next year, where I have a choice of 13 or 14 or 15 operators that is going to suit my needs.
And they don't get penalized if they
There's
decide
no
to defer
penalty.
it?
There is no penalty in that regard.
What about those who, when the first list come out and they are accredited to go, and for whatever reason, you alluded to economic reasons as one factor, they say, look, I can't make it. Do they lose points then on their system?
Yes, they do. Moulana, let me explain something to you, right? Our system has been developed and evolved to such a point that when you get accredited, you can go onto the system and either accept your accreditation or transfer your accreditation. Now, if you choose to do the transfer, there is no deduction of points. There is no penalty. But we give a deadline of, let's call it 7 days. And within that 7 days, you don't notify SAOC or you fail to perform, as we would call it. So there's no notification, there's no indication, there's no acceptance. And SAOC cancels your accreditation. It is that accreditation that attracts a penalty of 30 points. Now, the purpose for that is we cannot allow you to remain in a queue and have the same problem over and over again. You're prejudicing the next people in the queue. No sooner do you either transfer or notify us that you're not going to go, then we can replace it with people that are waiting in the queue. If you delay or defer and you do nothing about it, then you have to be penalized as a result of the situation. A lot of times people come to us and say, but you know, my cell number has changed. We don't know that as SAOC. You need to know that you need to inform us that you have a change in the cell phone, because our messages go out to a cell phone that you have applied with and that you have put into our system. So we cannot be held responsible for those kind of changes in your lifestyle or in your process.
When you say transfer, it means they can then choose a coming year. It doesn't
Or
have to be
3 or 4 years in the future.
Okay, and,
Yes.
and there's no penalty
There's
whatsoever.
no penalty in that regard.
Moving on now to the processes in the kingdom. What does it entail? You spoke about, obviously there's the protocols that we hear about on an annual basis. What does SAOC need to do in terms of the different mechanisms and the different plug-ins in the Saudi kingdom?
Before anything comes to pass, the most important is to accept the conditions of the protocol documents with the Ministry of Hajj and also with the affiliate subsidiaries like the Muassasa, the Adillah, which is the Muassasa from Medina, the Naqaba, which is the the busing authority, the Wukala, which is the United Agents Office, and also make sure that the field officers are in place from a perspective of what we need to do. So once all those documents are complete and signed, you will then be given an indication that you have 2,000 people to bring for Hajj through South Africa. Either you're going to bring it through the mission, as they would call it, or you're going to bring it through the companies that fall under the mission, which are the accredited Hajj operators. So in the past years, we've always had the situation where we accredit the Hajj operators, and they're the ones who will fulfill the logistics of people traveling to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for that particular purpose. But they cannot step out of those boundaries. They have to, maintain themselves within the boundaries of the laws that are prescribed within the protocol. Once that is done and dusted, we can now release the list of 2,000 people, do the accreditation. Once that runs through, the Hajj operator will now start preparing his contracts with the hotels in Makkah, with the hotels in Medina, buildings in Azizia, and then going to the Muassasa and the Adillah to register themselves and get themselves allocated with specific number of beds in Mina and in Arafat, etc. So those are the kind of processes that happen in the background that SAOC facilitates and SAOC gets involved in. Over and above that, there is a new system of electronic processing that has taken place, where the Ministry of Hajj has developed an electronic system where every passport has to be scanned into their system. It then gets passed through the processes into the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and then the message comes down to the embassy where the visa will be printed. So all of this happens in the background prior to the first person departing for Hajj, alhamdulillah. SAOC is involved in this. SAOC then gets involved in the, in the collation of the passports, delivering it to the embassy, getting the visas printed and so forth. Once that is done, we now have a group of people that we call the Hajj Mission, and that Hajj Mission will go to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and start the preparations in Saudi Arabia. An office in Jeddah, an office in Medina, an office in Makkah, a clinic in Medina, a clinic in Makkah, and a clinic in Azizia. So those are the setups and the preparatory structures that we would put into place before the first Hujjaj arrives on the 1st of Zilqaidah.
What does it entail when we hear this term, the Hajj Mission?
Mm-hmm.
Now, those who went for Hajj may have some idea. Those who haven't been for Hajj, what's the Hajj Mission all about? What's their function?
The Hajj Mission's function is basically a facilitation to make sure that there is a structure that happens between the Hujjaj, the Hajj operator, and the authorities in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So we have a team of people led by our current Hajj mission head, which is Hafiz Ismail Kulvadia, and he has a team of dedicated people that will basically operate under him within the parameters that have been defined by the protocol that we have signed. So we must basically work according to those rules and ensure that the delivery of service from a Hajj operator perspective and from a SAOC perspective is in sync with what is grounded in the protocols.
And what kind of services do they offer to the Hujjaj? I know there was the medical element.
Yes.
Beyond that?
That is one of the elements. The other is a meet and greet at the airports to ensure that we interact with the authorities at the airports. So let's use an example. On the 1st of Zilqaidah this year, alhamdulillah, we had 90 people that flew into Jeddah. And prior to arrival, we provided the authorities in the kingdom with the necessary flight schedules. So they've got the schedule of every arriving passenger from South Africa from the 1st of Zilhijjah until the last flight round about the 29th or the 30th of August. So all of that forms part of a structure that we make sure that we interact with the authorities. So when they arrive at the airport in Jeddah, we have authorities on hand, the passports get taken from all those pilgrims, everybody's passports are scanned, they are legitimate pilgrims that have now come into the country. They are not dealing, or the authorities in the kingdom are not dealing with each individual pilgrim, but they are dealing with the authority of SAOC and the Hajj Mission to ensure that all that facilitation is basically smoothed over in order to facilitate the transition or the movement from south to north. Once that is done, there's also a facilitation of the buses. So SAOC notifies the Muassasa, we've got 88 people. That 88 people will then be bused from Jeddah to Medina. So 2 buses need to be brought in order to ensure that those people are moved and timeously moved so that there is no undue delays in the kingdom. All that mission is there to do is to shadow and to facilitate the gap between what the Hajj operator does and the Hujjaj, as well as with the authorities in the kingdom.
In as far as Hajj operators are concerned, I mean, if you look again 10 years, 12 years back, there used to be a lot of conflict. People would come back from Hajj and there was a lot of outpouring of emotion and perhaps even legal battles. In terms of complaints, I think perhaps the actual numbers may have reduced because the quota is reduced, but proportionately, do you feel now that things are running much smoother? There are lesser issues of conflict between Hajis and Hajj operators. Proportionately, are the number of complaints reducing over the years?
Moulana, in 2005, 2006, when I first got involved in the Gauteng region, we had 86 complaints that year, only in the Gauteng region alone. And, we had to wade through, a flurry of information from the Hajj operator, from the aggrieved Haji, to make sure that we can try and adjudicate or mediate the whole process. Alhamdulillah, we've put into place a whole set of processes. Hajj operator accreditation is one of them. There's a significant process that we go through before we actually accredit a Hajj operator. Once they are accredited, they need to sign a code of conduct with SAOC. And that is code of conduct in terms of, the expectation that we have in terms of how they must deal with the Hujjaj, how they deal with SAOC, how they deal with the authorities, how they deal with their fellow operators as well. So these are all aspects relating to service delivery. And alhamdulillah, in the last 5 years, nationally, we've reduced the number of complaints to between 5 and 10.
MashaAllah.
Alhamdulillah. And that is through the good work that the operators are doing, as well as the cooperation that they're giving our mission, and what they're giving the Hujjaj. What the Hujjaj are getting is what they are being promised in their contracts. So all of that has been put into place to make sure that we don't have a situation where people are coming back to complain about logistics or about issues, and rather having the Hujjaj concentrate on the most important factor, which is the ibadah.
Well, on that positive note, let's take one more break. When we come back, we move towards the concluding remarks of the program this evening.
فبالجهاد بنى الإسلام قوته كاليأس أن يغشى أمانينا.
Welcome back. We move into the last segment of the program now. In studio this evening, we have the president of SAOC, Sheikh Isup, and we're talking about the different processes that SAOC is involved in, that the Haji needs to plug into if they want to get accredited for Hajj. And we spoke also a little bit about Umrah earlier on. There's a lot of interest, Shane, in terms of what's happening in the kingdom. And obviously, that's not directly SAOC's area of expertise as such, but in your engagements with people in the kingdom, what are they saying? By when will they be able to take bigger capacities, bigger crowds. I mean, you see all these visuals and these WhatsApps and you see these videos and you look at the new section of the Haram and it looks very beautiful and people start wondering, but hey, why don't they just throw the quota open? Because how many South Africans will go in the greater scheme of things and comparatively speaking? But what are they saying? What are their plans also in terms of the next 5 years or so in terms of infrastructure capacity? Before we get
to that, I think, one of the key things that you've touched upon is, from a South Africa point of view, yes, we are few. We are few people and that do go across for Hajj and so forth, right? The problem that you have is if they throw the quota open, one needs to understand, and this was something that was actually doing its rounds on social media early on in the year. There's going to be no quota from 2016. That's what people were saying. You need to have a little bit of perception and understanding that we are 1.6 billion Muslims in the world. If 50% of that 1.6 billion were economically able to go for Hajj, that's 800 million. If 50% of that were of adult structure, that's 400 million. Now, if 10% of that 400 million decided that we're going for Hajj this year, 40 million people to converge on Makkah and Medina is not possible. Therefore, a quota will always remain in place. We just need to make sure that we form part of a process that has our fair quota rather than have 2,000. At the moment, information that they have at their disposal indicates that we have a perceived amount of 2.5 million people in this country. We're talking about Muslim people that carry a green South African ID book. And as a result of that, the quota is 1,000 pilgrims per 1 million Muslims in every country. Hence 2,500. The 500 was reduced when 4 years ago the Minister of Hajj said 20% will be cut from every international country and 50% will be cut from within Saudi Arabia because of the ongoing construction. You and I both know we saw the accident last year in the Haram, and since that accident, work has actually been slowed down considerably in the Haram reconstruction. The Bin Laden Group, which is the construction company, has been taken off the project. And just the other day, I read in one of the Saudi papers that one of the other building groups, the Saudi Auger company, is going to file for bankruptcy. So building in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is also going through their economic troughs. The whole economic situation in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is a major problem. Oil has come down from $140 to $40, and as a result, they need to find funds elsewhere. A month ago, they've also indicated that, inshallah, in the future years, 5 million mu'tamirin will be allowed to come for Umrah. Now, that's all good and well. We ask about an increase in the quota for Hajj, and that becomes a small problem, because logistics need to be put into place to ensure that the capacity in Mina can carry any increase in the Hajj quota. Right now, the capacity probably can carry between 2 and 2.5 million people. If you're looking to double that to 5 million people, you've got a major logistical problem in Mina and probably on Arafah as well.
Have they indicated as to what their plans are for Mina? I mean, everybody hears about the plans for the Haram, and a lot of that has come to fruition. But very rarely do you hear about plans for Mina.
There is a plan afloat, to probably reconstruct Mina. But that's going to take money. And right now, Saudi Arabia is probably, at a loss of, excess capital. They're involved in, securing their borders in the southern part of the country. And that war is costing a tremendous amount of money, coupled with the fact that the oil prices have come down considerably. So they need to find a strategic balance in order to make sure that they can increase the capacity, of the mashayir, in order to increase the capacity of people coming for Hajj.
There used to be a lot of talk, I know some years back, about combining South Africa's quota with the SADC countries. Is that still on the cards? Is that still possible?
We tried to discuss that, but there are, domestic political ramifications around that. And I think that brings its own challenges. Whether you fall under one muassasa or not, I think between South Africa and the various other SADC countries, our governments must come to an agreement that, we can process this as a SADC quota or not. In the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, it would be an easy situation. As I say, we fall under one muassasa, and as a result of that, management thereof would become easy. The difficulty you find is that if there's growth in another country, so let's use Mozambique as an example. Mozambique is a fairly large Muslim population, probably larger than South Africa. Then what happens to that SADC quota in terms of the percentages that go there? So if economic price or if the economic stability of that country grows, then more people from there would want to go for Hajj, and that would deplete South Africa even further.
One quick question based on what you mentioned earlier on about, they work the quotas according to the official numbers in terms of Muslims in the country. But don't we have a problem then? Because the last census, I know the last census definitely they didn't ask about religion. The one prior to that, I'm not 100% sure. And then simultaneously, we've got this big influx of Muslim people coming in from different parts of the world and settling in South Africa and becoming legitimate citizens. How do we overcome that problem?
Well, that's a major problem, and that is something that we've engaged our government on with regards to making sure that we can get reasonably accurate statistics of our Muslim population in South Africa. You mentioned the influx of people coming through and people getting married to local South Africans. Whether they get married to Muslim South Africans is one thing, but where our foreign brothers are coming in and getting married to indigenous people, making them Muslim, is where we're losing out on Muslim statistics in our country. And that is something that we firmly need to engage our government with to make sure that we try to get a proper census. The Statistician General, unfortunately, and this is obviously through the census program, as you've said, the last two haven't had any process with regards to our numbers, so we can't give an accurate number to the kingdom. We've asked that if we do a private census and fund it and do the necessary, would it be signed off? And we're still waiting for a response on that.
The big scare in recent weeks has been about the cost to the visas. I heard somebody say to me outside the masjid the other day, hey, at 2,000 riyals per passport or per visa, I'm going with my family of 5, I would have to reconsider the whole thing for the December Umrah. What's the story there? Is it still ambiguous?
Well, Moulana, there is a tremendous amount of ambiguity in that particular thing, because we sit with a scenario where we look at the newspaper articles both in Saudi Gazette and in Arab News, and that's the only information that is currently to the fore. I've engaged with the embassy in Pretoria and I've asked them the questions about it, and they've said to me that there's absolutely no information that is forthcoming as a result of this. What they see is what they've read in the press. We've asked our diplomatic corps in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to engage the authorities there to get more detail and to get more information. And once that detail and information becomes forthcoming, then we can certainly share it with the public of South Africa.
In conclusion, Shaheen, your message to people out there?
Well, first of all, in conclusion, Jazakallah khairan to you and to ITV for the opportunity once again to shed the light on some of the misnomers that we have in the community. I think the most important message right now for people that are going to be performing Hajj this year, they are the ambassadors of South Africa in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for them, grant them success in their Hajj inshallah, grant them Hajj Maqbool wa Mabrur, and for them to represent this country in a manner that is conducive to what we expect of them inshallah. I hope and pray inshallah that people who are going to be applying on the system and people who have applied in the system do it accurately, do it correctly, because as I mentioned to you a little bit earlier, one of the key factors that we continuously face with is the lie factor, and also the factor that people fail to read our rules of application and our application guidelines in order for them to get a better understanding of a process that is fair and equitable and transparent.
Shaheen, Jazakumullah for your time this evening. Much appreciated.
Jazakallah khairan once again for the opportunity, Moulana. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Well, that's it for this evening. Until next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
وينشر الهدي إيمانا وموعظة فبالجهالة قد خابت مساعينا غابت مناقبنا واسود حاضرنا غابت مناقبنا واسود حاضرنا وأوشك اليأس أن يغشى